The heavy door of the shooting range scraped against the concrete floor as it opened. A woman in her 50s stepped inside, blinking in the bright fluorescent lights. She wore simple clothes, a plain denim jacket that had seen better days and comfortable sneakers that made no sound on the polished floor. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and thick glasses sat on her nose. In one hand, she carried a well-worn handbag that looked like it had been her faithful companion for many years. She paused just inside the entrance, taking in the scene before her. The reception desk sat empty except for a young woman who barely looked up from her magazine. Behind her, 3 men in expensive shooting gear lounged on leather chairs, their fancy rifles propped against the coffee table. They wore matching team jackets with logos and patches, clearly regulars at this upscale range. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked without enthusiasm, her eyes still fixed on the magazine page showing the latest fashion trends. She chewed gum slowly as she waited for an answer. "I'd like to rent a lane for an hour, please," the woman said softly. Her voice carried a hint of nervousness, like someone asking directions in an unfamiliar neighborhood. The receptionist finally looked up, taking in the woman's modest appearance. "This is Elite Shooters," she said slowly, as if explaining something obvious. "We specialize in competitive shooting. The public range is 3 blocks down." She pointed vaguely toward the door with her magazine. "I understand," the woman replied patiently. "I'd still like to rent a lane here if possible." She placed her handbag on the counter, unzipping it to find her wallet. The leather was cracked with age, and inside, a few family photos peeked out beside her credit cards. The men in the corner exchanged glances and smirks. One of them, a tall man with graying temples and an expensive watch, whispered something to his companions. They chuckled quietly, but not quietly enough to hide their amusement. "Fine," the receptionist sighed, putting down her magazine. "That'll be $80 for an hour. Lane fees are higher here because of our equipment quality." She emphasized the last words, as if the woman might not understand the difference. The woman counted out the cash carefully, placing each bill on the counter with precise movements. As she waited for her lane assignment, she noticed the plaques on the wall: championship certificates, tournament photos, and newspaper clippings celebrating various victories. "Lane 4, the receptionist said flatly, sliding a plastic key card across the counter. "Equipment rental is extra if you need it." She assumed, of course, that someone like this would need to rent everything. "I brought my own," the woman said simply, adjusting her glasses. The men in the corner stopped talking completely now. Bringing your own equipment was something serious shooters did, not casual visitors. As she walked toward lane 4, the woman kept her eyes down, avoiding the stares that followed her. Her footsteps echoed in the large space. The range itself was impressive. 14 lanes stretching out before her, each equipped with electronic scoring systems and adjustable targets. "Range rules say no jewelry on the shooting line," the range master pointed out, noticing the simple silver band on her finger. "Wedding rings can interfere with grip." His tone suggested he expected her to protest, to show the typical amateur's resistance to rules. She slipped off the ring without a word, placing it carefully in a small pocket of her handbag. The action was practiced, natural, like she'd done it many times before. This observation made the range master pause slightly, but he quickly returned to his assumption that she was just well prepared for her first attempt. The champion caught sight of something through the corner of his eye, a faded mark on her wrist as she removed her jacket. It looked like a tattoo, barely visible beneath her sleeve. His curiosity stirred, though his pride prevented him from showing it. 10 minutes, the receptionist called out to the woman. "Your lane time starts then." She spoke louder than necessary, as if volume would help comprehension. The other patrons continued their shooting, but many kept glancing at the newcomer. A younger shooter approached the group near the coffee machine. "What's the bet?" he asked quietly. "I say she'll ask for help within 5 minutes. His friends grinned, eager to make it interesting. 3 minutes, one countered. She'll realize she's in over her head real quick. They didn't bother lowering their voices anymore. The entertainment value was too good to miss. The woman placed her handbag on the small shelf provided for personal items. She moved deliberately, each action purposeful and measured. Her breathing seemed controlled, her posture relaxed despite the scrutiny. The range master returned to check on her setup one more time. The ear protection is mandatory, he reminded her, pointing to the headphones hanging on the wall. And eye protection too. Safety first, especially for beginners. She nodded and reached into her bag once more. When she brought out her own protective gear, it wasn't the standard issue equipment the range provided. Instead, she held items that looked well used and carefully maintained. The champion noticed the quality of her ear protection. The same professional-grade brand he used. It was expensive equipment, not something an amateur would typically purchase. His confidence wavered slightly, though he quickly dismissed the thought. "Ready when you are," the range master said, pointing to the now empty Lane 4. The previous shooter had gathered his equipment and left, complaining about the growing crowd of spectators. The woman approached her assigned position, carrying her bag with both hands. The betting group watched intently, phones out to record what they expected would be an embarrassing fail. Even those who weren't participating in the unofficial wager had stopped their own practice to watch. The shooting range had become a theater, and everyone expected a comedy. The champion made one final adjustment to his rifle, telling himself he was focusing on his own practice. But like everyone else, his attention had shifted to the unfolding drama. The day had taken an unexpected turn, though not in any way these people anticipated. As the woman set down her bag and began her final preparations, the talk around her grew quieter. People positioned themselves for the best view, some even pausing their own sessions entirely. The stage was set for what they all assumed would be a brief and amusing interlude in their day. No one could have predicted that their assumptions were about to be shattered as dramatically as any target on the range. The woman's calm demeanor hadn't wavered once despite the constant judgment. Perhaps she'd been through this before, in different circumstances with different people, or perhaps she simply knew something they didn't. The clock ticked toward her starting time as anticipation built in the room. Even the usually busy receptionist had abandoned her magazine to watch. The unofficial comedy show was about to begin, or so they all believed. How wrong they would soon discover they were. The woman stood at the side of her lane, waiting for her turn while another shooter finished his practice session. The electronic target display showed mediocre scores, but the shooter seemed satisfied with his efforts. He was a regular at the club, someone who came more for the social aspect than actual improvement. From her position, she could overhear the conversation happening near the coffee station. The three men from the lobby had moved there, their voices carrying across the range despite their attempts to whisper. "Did you see who just walked in?" One of them snickered. "I think someone's book club let out early." His companions laughed, not bothering to hide their amusement. They were the kind of men who measured others by their equipment and appearance. The receptionist had joined them now, adding her own observations. She asked about lane rental like she was ordering coffee. She said, rolling her eyes, "Probably saw a movie about sharpshooting and thought she'd give it a try." The champion overheard this from his lane and shook his head slightly. He was known for his precision shots, not his people skills. His expensive rifle gleamed under the lights as he made another small adjustment to the scope. He glanced at his watch, irritated that his practice time was being interrupted by what he considered amateur hour. "I bet she drops the gun when it fires," another regular chuckled, adjusting his ear protection. "Some people just don't belong in places like this." His friends nodded in agreement, their matching team jackets creating a barrier between them and the newcomer. The range master approached the woman with a clipboard, his expression showing more pity than professionalism. "Ma'am, I noticed you need help with the equipment rental," he said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "We have special beginner packages with lighter guns." "That won't be necessary," she replied politely. "I brought my own." The range master's eyebrows raised in surprise, but he quickly covered it with a forced smile. "I see," he said, not really seeing it all. Well, if you need assistance loading the magazines, just raise your hand. Many first-timers find that part challenging. He made a note on his clipboard, probably marking her as someone to watch carefully. The champion leaned over to see what kind of equipment this woman had brought. He expected a small pistol at best, perhaps a .22 caliber that beginners often used. When she opened her bag, he prepared himself for the amusement of watching someone struggle with proper form. "Look at this," someone whispered nearby. Did she bring her knitting supplies by mistake? The joke spread like ripples in a pond, each person adding their own comment as it passed along. The woman seemed to have exceptional hearing, though she gave no sign of acknowledging their words. She moved with quiet efficiency, seeming to block out the world around her. Perhaps she'd experienced this kind of dismissal before, in other places, other situations. Range rules say no jewelry on the shooting line, the range master pointed out, noticing the simple silver band on her finger. Wedding rings can interfere with grip. His tone suggested he expected her to protest, to show the typical amateur's resistance to rules. She slipped off the ring without a word, placing it carefully in a small pocket of her handbag. The action was practiced, natural, like she'd done it many times before. This observation made the range master pause slightly, but he quickly returned to his assumption that she was just well prepared for her first attempt. The champion caught sight of something through the corner of his eye, a faded mark on her wrist as she removed her jacket. It looked like a tattoo, barely visible beneath her sleeve. His curiosity stirred, though his pride prevented him from showing it. 10 minutes, the receptionist called out to the woman. "Your lane time starts then." She spoke louder than necessary, as if volume would help comprehension. The other patrons continued their shooting, but many kept glancing at the newcomer. A younger shooter approached the group near the coffee machine. "What's the bet?" he asked quietly. "I say she'll ask for help within 5 minutes." His friends grinned, eager to make it interesting. The woman unzipped her handbag slowly, like someone unwrapping a precious gift. Inside, nestled between everyday items, was a cloth bundle wrapped with care. She lifted it out with gentle hands, placing it on the table beside her lane with almost reverent precision. As she unwrapped the cloth, the rifle inside came into view. It wasn't what anyone expected. The weapon looked simple, almost ordinary compared to the high-tech rifles being used by the other shooters. There were no fancy scopes or modern attachments, just a well-maintained hunting rifle that had clearly seen years of use. The metal parts showed signs of careful cleaning, polished to a dull shine rather than the flashy gleam of newer models. The wooden stock had small scratches and marks, telling silent stories of past adventures. Those watching expected disappointment, but what they saw instead was craftsmanship and care. "That's it," someone whispered nearby. "I've seen better guns in pawn shops." The comment drew quiet laughter from the small group that had gathered to watch. The champion glanced over again, masking his curiosity by checking his own equipment. The woman's fingers moved across the rifle with familiarity, checking the chamber with practiced ease. She moved like someone who knew every inch of the weapon, every weight and balance point. Her actions were automatic, muscle memory taking over as she prepared the gun for use. The range master watched with growing confusion. He'd expected to see nervous fumbling, the typical hesitation of someone handling a firearm for the first time. Instead, he witnessed the smooth movements of experience. Still, he clung to his assumptions, telling himself that some people just follow instructions well. "Targets at 25 yards, he announced, holding up the standard paper targets. Standard range distance for beginners. His patronizing tone hadn't changed, even as doubt began to creep into his observations. The woman looked up from her gun. "Could we set them at 100 yards? She asked politely. The request drew surprised looks from everyone within earshot. 100 yards was competition distance, the same distance the champion used for his practice. 100. The range master repeated, sure he'd misheard. "That's quite far for." "Are you sure?" His professional training warred with his personal judgments. The range rules said customers could request any legal distance, but common sense suggested this was a mistake. "Yes, please," she confirmed, her voice steady. 100 yards. The champion turned fully now, no longer pretending to focus on his own practice. Someone asking for championship distance was worth his attention. The betting group exchanged knowing looks. "This is going to be even funnier than we thought," one whispered. "She'll miss the whole target board from there." Their phones remained ready, eager to capture the moment of failure. While the range master reluctantly adjusted the target mechanism, the woman continued her preparations. She removed a small notepad from her bag, the pages worn and filled with handwritten notes. Ballistic calculations, wind compensation formulas, and shooting reminders fill the margins. The champion's interest sharpened. Those weren't beginner notes. His own journal looked similar, though his was leather-bound and expensive. He'd spent thousands on shooting courses and equipment, while this woman carried simple paper filled with hand-drawn diagrams. "You understand that distance affects accuracy," the range master felt compelled to explain. "Professional shooters train for years to handle 100-yard shots." His words sounded rehearsed, like a warning he gave often to overambitious customers. "I understand," she replied simply, closing her notepad. There was no nervousness in her response, no hint that she might reconsider her choice. If anything, she seemed more comfortable now that her equipment was ready. She loaded the magazine with smooth efficiency, each round sliding into place without hesitation. The action required steady hands and practiced coordination, skills that contradicted her earlier portrayal as a casual visitor. The champion found himself reassessing his earlier judgment. Other shooters had abandoned their own practice entirely now. The informal audience had grown, curiosity overriding their initial dismissal. Even the receptionist had wandered over from her desk, drawn by the unusual spectacle of someone so seemingly ordinary requesting professional shooting conditions. The electronic scoring system displayed zeros across the board, waiting for its first shots. The woman settled into position, her body finding its perfect balance. Without realizing it, everyone in the range had fallen silent. Even the constant chatter from other lanes seemed to pause, as if the whole building was holding its breath. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but no one noticed. She adjusted her glasses briefly before removing them entirely, tucking them carefully into her jacket pocket. Her eyes, now fully visible, seemed sharper, more focused. The champion noticed how steady her gaze was when fixed on the distant target. No squinting, no uncertainty. The rifle came up smoothly to her shoulder, nestling into place like it belonged there. Her form was textbook perfect, something many of the regulars would struggle to achieve even after months of practice. The range master found himself unconsciously nodding, his professional eye recognizing proper technique despite his earlier prejudices. "Watch this," one of the betting group whispered excitedly. Phone cameras zoomed in on the woman. They expected to capture an embarrassing moment of recoil knocking her backward, or complete misses that would provide endless entertainment at the coffee shop later. The woman's breathing patterns changed subtly. Long, slow inhales followed by controlled exhales. Each movement was precise, calculated. Her finger found the trigger, hovering with perfect discipline. No amateur nervousness, no shaking hands. The champion had stopped even pretending to practice. His expensive rifle rested against the lane divider as he watched openly now. Something about her stance triggered memories of military training videos he'd studied. But that couldn't be right. This was just some ordinary woman who'd wandered into their exclusive club. The range master gripped his clipboard tightly, his knuckles white. He realized he was actually nervous, though he couldn't explain why. Part of him wanted her to succeed, to prove his initial judgment wrong. Another part dreaded the paperwork if she somehow set a record. The moment stretched like taffy. Seconds felt like minutes. The woman's entire body became still, almost mechanical in its precision. Even her breathing seemed to stop as she found that perfect moment shooters call the natural pause. This was when professionals took their shots. Then it happened. The crack of the rifle split the air like thunder in a clear sky. The sound was sharp, clean, definitive. The recoil that everyone expected to overwhelm her barely moved her position. She absorbed it like she was part of the rifle itself, her body already prepared for the force. Through the spotting scope, the range master's eyes widened. He blinked rapidly, unsure he was seeing correctly. The target, displayed clearly on the monitor behind him, showed an impact that made his jaw drop. "Check the target," someone called from the crowd. The electronic board flickered as it processed the data. Numbers appeared on the screen, impossible numbers that made everyone look twice. Perfect center. Dead bullseye. The shot had landed exactly where any expert marksman would aim. But it was more than just hitting the target. The precision was extraordinary, even by championship standards. The champion leaned forward, squinting at his own monitor. He'd been tracking his shots carefully all morning, proud of his groupings. But this single shot from the unknown woman was tighter than anything he'd achieved in his last tournament. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Did you see that? No way, that was beginner's luck. Check it again." The disbelief was almost palpable. People stepped closer to the monitors, unable to trust their own eyes. The range master looked up from his clipboard, his mouth hanging open. In 20 years of managing this facility, he'd never seen such a perfect first shot from anyone, let alone someone so unassuming. He glanced at the woman, who remained calm and collected, already preparing for her next attempt. The betting group stood frozen, phones still recording but minds already processing their loss. The oldest of them, who'd been so sure of her failure, physically shook his head as if to clear a hallucination. Their entertainment had turned into something unexpected. The receptionist clutched her magazine like a security blanket, the gossip she'd been reading suddenly meaningless compared to what had just happened. She judged this woman based on clothes and appearance, never imagining she'd witness such skill. The woman's shoulders remained level as she prepared for her second shot. No victory dance, no smug satisfaction, just the same calm concentration that had carried her through the first attempt. It was as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Other shooters who'd been practicing in their own lanes stopped entirely now. Some removed their ear protection, wanting to hear the crowd's reactions more clearly. A few approached closer, drawn by the commotion like moths to a flame. The woman proceeded to load another round, her movements so smooth they seemed rehearsed 1,000 times before. Every shooter in the building had abandoned their own practice now. Lanes sat empty, equipment cooling, forgotten by owners who couldn't tear their eyes away from Lane 4. The champion felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine doubt in his own abilities. He'd won 3 state championships, hung certificates on his home office wall, and received respect wherever he went. Yet this unknown woman had just outshot his best practice scores with what appeared to be casual ease. "Set up the recorder," someone suggested from the crowd. "We need proof of this." The range master fumbled with the video system, connecting it to Lane 4's equipment. His hands trembled slightly, betraying professional excitement mixed with personal dismay. The second shot rang out with the same sharp clarity as the first. This time, no one jumped at the sound. They were ready, focused entirely on the target display. The bullet's impact showed on the monitor instantly, and collective gasps filled the air. Closer to the center, even tighter grouping than before. The precision was beyond what many considered achievable, especially with an old hunting rifle that cost less than most people's car payments. The champion's expensive equipment suddenly felt meaningless, his technological advantages rendered pointless against pure skill. "That's impossible," muttered a junior league competitor who'd been bragging about his tournament performance minutes earlier. His trophy case at home now seemed less significant, his achievements deflated by comparison to what he was witnessing. The third shot followed without pause. The woman's concentration never wavered, her routine becoming a meditation in motion. Breath in, breath out, squeeze the trigger. Each movement flowed into the next with mechanical precision that spoke of countless hours of practice. Perfect. Again. The grouping on target was now tighter than what most professional shooters achieved after warming up. She was making the impossible look ordinary, the extraordinary seem simple. The range master's clipboard lay forgotten on the counter as he stared at the display in disbelief. Young spectators pulled out their phones, frantically posting about what they were witnessing. Within minutes, messages pinged around the local shooting community. "You won't believe what's happening at elite shooters. Some woman just shattered the facility record. Get down here now." The champion's pride battled with his curiosity. He moved closer to observe her technique more carefully, abandoning all pretense of disinterest. Something felt familiar about her form, her breathing patterns, her unwavering focus. These weren't self-taught skills. Shot 4 landed with the same precision. By now, her grouping was tighter than anything the range had seen in its 20-year history. The electronic board kept updating scores that seemed to defy the laws of physics, or at least the laws of probability. "Check her equipment," someone suggested. The range master, eager for any explanation, examined her rifle during her brief pause to reload. The weapon was clean, well-maintained, but nothing special. The scope was standard quality. No modifications, no technological advantages whatsoever. The fifth shot continued the pattern of perfection. The crowd had swollen now, word spreading through the facility like wildfire. Even instructors teaching in other ranges abandoned their classes to witness the phenomenon. They brought their students, who needed to see what true mastery looked like. The woman began packing her equipment with the same careful precision she'd used throughout her shooting. Each motion was deliberate, methodical. As she reached for her protective eyewear, her sleeve slid back slightly, exposing more of the faded tattoo on her wrist. The champion stepped closer, drawn by curiosity stronger than his pride. His trained eye caught the distinctive design, crossed rifles beneath an eagle. His breath caught. That symbol belonged to an elite military marksmanship unit, a group known throughout the shooting world for producing the finest shooters in the country. "Excuse me," the range master approached hesitantly, clipboard in hand. "Would you be willing to let us document this achievement? These scores are remarkable." His tone had completely changed from his earlier condescension. Respect had replaced assumption. The woman looked up, considering the request. In the brighter light near the target area, her features seemed sharper somehow. The same plain appearance that had fooled everyone earlier now carried different meaning. The simple glasses, the modest clothes, they'd been visual camouflage hiding something extraordinary. A younger shooter pulled up an article on his phone. "Look at this," he called excitedly. There was only one female marksman in that unit in the 90s. They called her the silent shooter because she never spoke during competitions. His friends gathered around to read. The champion felt pieces clicking into place. He remembered reading about that unit, about their grueling training regimen that produced shooters who could perform under any condition. Those skills didn't fade like physical strength. They stayed with you forever, buried beneath everyday life until needed. "I served from 1990 to 1997. The woman confirmed quietly. Her voice carried to everyone in the hushed crowd. "Marksmanship training was just part of my duties." The understatement brought knowing smiles from other veterans in the group. The range master flipped through his record book with newfound understanding. "The facility record was set by a former Olympic qualifier," he explained to the crowd. "It stood for 6 years. You just surpassed it by a margin I've never seen before." Someone mentioned her married name appearing on the credit card receipt. Another person recalled hearing whispers about a legendary marksman who'd retired and disappeared into civilian life. The pieces of the puzzle were assembling themselves, creating a picture far different from anyone's initial impression. "I just came to practice," she said simply, securing her rifle in its cloth wrapping. "I try to maintain my skills, though I don't get out to the range as often as I'd like." Her humble demeanor hadn't changed despite the revelation. The receptionist looked mortified, remembering her earlier dismissiveness. "I'm so sorry about how I treated you," she blurted out. "I had no idea." The woman waved away the apology graciously. understanding how appearances could deceive. Young shooters pressed closer with questions. How did you learn to breathe like that? What's the secret to staying calm under pressure? She answered patiently, sharing techniques that could help beginners improve their own skills. The champion found his voice finally. I've been shooting competitively for 15 years, he admitted. I've never seen groupings like yours. Even at tournaments, the best shooters can't match what you just did. His confession felt like lifting a weight from his shoulders. The photographer snapped pictures now with permission, capturing history being made. These images would spread through shooting forums and social media, creating legends about the day an ordinary woman proved that expertise often hides in plain sight. Military snipers are different, explained an older veteran from the crowd. They train for situations where one shot must count. That mindset never leaves you, even years after service. His words resonated with nodding heads from other former service members. The woman finished packing as conversation buzzed around her. She'd accomplished what she came to do: maintain her edge, test her skills against a challenging distance. The crowd's reaction was secondary to her personal satisfaction of knowing she still had it. Would you consider teaching a class? The range master asked hopefully. We have many members who could learn from your techniques. The suggestion sparked excited murmurs from spectators who'd been mentally calculating the worth of such instruction. The woman packed her belongings methodically, placing each item back into her handbag with the same precision she'd shown on the range. Her simple cloth rifle bag held her now famous weapon, wrapped with care to protect it from scratches. The crowd watched in respectful silence as she completed her routine. The range master hurried to his office, returning with a camera. Please, he insisted, at least let us take a photo of the target display. Your achievement needs to be documented. The woman considered briefly before nodding. She understood the importance of recording excellence, though personal fame meant little to her. Young competitors gathered around, phones buzzing with messages from friends who'd missed the spectacle. Tell them what happened, someone encouraged another shooter. They'll never believe it otherwise. The story was already growing beyond its simple beginnings, taking on the quality of legend. The champion stood apart from the crowd, lost in thought. His earlier arrogance felt hollow now, like an empty trophy case. Years of practice, thousands of dollars spent on equipment, countless competitions won. And yet this woman with basic gear had outperformed him effortlessly. The lesson stung worse than any defeat. Can I ask you something? A teenage shooter approached the woman nervously. How do you stay so calm? I get nervous just thinking about competitions. She smiled at the familiar question, remembering her own early doubts. Teaching moments like these mattered more than breaking records. Fear affects breath, she explained simply. Control your breathing, and fear loses its power. The young shooter nodded eagerly, committing the wisdom to memory. Around them, others listened closely, hungry for insights from someone who'd achieved what they aspired to. The receptionist approached with a visitor's card. Could you sign this? She asked apologetically. I want to remember this day, and what I learned about not judging people. The woman signed with a small message. Skills hide everywhere. Look closer next time. Outside, cars had started gathering. Word spread quickly through the shooting community. Parking spaces filled with vehicles as more people arrived hoping to catch a glimpse of the mystery marksman before she left. The range's reputation would change forever after today's events. You've changed our whole club, the range master admitted. We pride ourselves on being elite, but you've shown us what true excellence looks like. He gestured toward the wall where framed photographs celebrated past champions. Your skills belong here, whether you want recognition or not. The woman checked her watch, mindful of family commitments waiting at home. I appreciate your kindness, she said, but records aren't why I shoot. Practice keeps my mind sharp, my hands steady. That's reward enough. Her philosophical approach impressed everyone listening. Veterans among the spectators understood her perspective perfectly. They'd seen combat, knew the difference between sport and survival. When skills served life or death purposes, competitive trophies became unnecessary decorations. Real warriors needed no validation beyond their own readiness. A local news van pulled into the parking lot, antenna extended high. The photographer from inside immediately started setting up equipment, drawn by phone calls about a remarkable story. The range master intercepted them, explaining the situation while protecting the woman's privacy. "She has the right to leave without media attention," he told the news crew firmly. This was a private practice session, not a publicity event. His newfound respect translated into protective action, ensuring the woman could maintain her anonymity if desired. The champion finally approached directly. "I've been thinking about what happened here today," he began carefully. "You've taught me something important about humility. Could I ask your advice on improving my technique?" His request came from genuine curiosity, not competitive spirit. "Focus less on equipment, more on fundamentals," she advised. "Expensive gear can't compensate for rushed breathing or tense muscles. Basic rifles in practiced hands beat fancy weapons held by amateurs." The champion nodded, already planning to simplify his approach. As she moved toward the exit, young shooters formed an informal honor guard, not blocking her path, but creating a respectful corridor through which she could pass. Their admiration expressed itself through reverent space rather than overwhelming attention. The owner of the range emerged from his private office, having missed the actual shooting but heard about the aftermath. "We'd like to offer you lifetime membership," he announced, "and access to our private championship training facilities." The gesture recognized both her achievement and their earlier oversight.